I'm Thomas Fox.
I'm Bruno.
And we were spending some more time with you. And what's really good is this week we're a new report out about raising children, the cost of raising children. And obviously it's very expensive overall, but kind of amazed at the new numbers and especially the increase over the last decade. What was really interesting is it says, and this is from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, that the cost to raise a child from birth until the age of 18 for a middle-income family, 2 parents, averaged $226,000 roughly last year. But that doesn't include college. That's just the cost to raise children. What's really interesting about this is a 40% increase since 2001.
And to clarify on that, mid-range is anywhere between, the report said, $57,600 and about $99,730. When you go over that, you can expect anything over $99,730. The report says that you can expect to spend upwards of $370,000 plus, depending on where you live and what kind of childcare or other services you need.
Indeed. So it was interesting that where this report came from, where it is, and the fact that it just leaves out college costs altogether. Which is another huge expense. College, as you know too, we've seen I think it was a 104% increase since the 70s in the cost of college tuition.
Yep.
So even if you're trying to, these numbers aside, which are it breaks out to I think on average $13,830 a year. And there's some people saying, well, I don't spend that much on my child, and other people saying, well, I spend more than that. But again, it's an average. Some people are going to spend less, some people are going to spend more.
And regionally, so the Northeast is actually the highest, or one of the highest regions to raise a child, followed by urban West, so Western United States, California, heavily populated areas, urban Midwest, and then towards the bottom were urban Southern states, and then rural areas.
So it's all throughout. But that's why I said overall it's an average. And it stands to reason too when you look at just how much costs have increased over the last couple of years, the last decade, inflation, and that real incomes really haven't been that much of a move at all. So people are trying to do much more with much less, which was interesting with babysitter.com. They actually did a poll on this, and what happened was 43% of the women that were polled said that they're actually going to wait to start or expand their family until they felt financially stable.
Right.
And that's an interesting thing. In years past, the economics never really came in, but there was a good book a couple of years back said the 2-income trap, about how much it really costs for both family members to work and raise children and things like that. And when you start to factor in, and probably one of these things in here, because another part that people are talking about was the cost of child care alone. And it was one quote I like from one of the people being interviewed says, "It takes half my paycheck to pay for my child care." You start to feel like, is it even worth it? And what she means in that sense is it even worth it to work? Not as it worth to have a child, but the costs associated just for child care. Before we even went on the show, a friend of mine in New York has 2 children and pays $300 per child for child care. And that's per week. And that's, how do you manage that? How do you fit that into your budget? So especially when you talk about New York and the expenses that is out there anyway, it's really, really difficult.
Another number, just to kind of throw it out there, is for the housing alone of a child can be upwards near $70,000 for that 0 to 17 years old or 18 years old, and that makes up about a third of that cost. So,
and you look at it, getting a bigger house and things like that. These are natural progressions you have to do when you're looking to grow your family. You say, wow, it's time to get a house. It's time to get Jimmy his own bedroom. And all these things like that. So it's very expensive. Some of the other expenses I thought, what was really interesting, they pointed out the increase in transportation costs, and obviously it's people with or without children feel this, but according to between 2000 and 2010, consumers paid on average 85% more per gallon within that time frame. And you look at that increase right there, and you see how all these little expenses kind of chip away at it. And it stands to reason why some people are going to say, you know what, I'm going to wait right now. I'd love to start a family, but I have to feel a little bit more confident. And that's all going to depend on what shakes out in the economy for the next year, 2 years.
Yep.
So we're going to have a kind of a wait and see kind of scenario in that scenario.
And a big part of that is the planning that you do before you decide to have children. A lot of resources a lot of articles that we looked into spoke about saving before a child comes. So they said a good number to start with is to have at least between $5,000 and $7,000 squared away just for that child in that first year, because you're going to have a lot of disposable diapers and a lot of just expenses that go along with having a newborn.
And the one stat, what was it, 50, on average, is $1,500 a year for the first year, just for diapers.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's when you look at that expense, you definitely want to have that money set aside. I know some people have some pushback back and forth on that. Well, even if you look at it, when people talk about home ownership, people say don't buy a home unless you have the money to put down, unless you have a discipline for saving.
Yep.
The same logic, in a sense, has got to apply to having children, because you have to be a saver. You have to be prepared for these increased expenses.
Yeah.
If you have to buy a house, if you have to, you need school clothes and this and that. So you have to be basically an experienced saver on top of being a parent.
Yep. So that all goes into the planning, or part of the planning process. Another thing that you really need to come to terms with, or to be very cognizant of, is the reality of your situation. What expectations do you have, or what would you like to see for your children, and how can you actually make that happen? So you want to determine at the outset, what's the living situation going to be like? Not everyone, is going to say, I need to give that child a room, but what would be comfortable for your style? What can you comfortably do for them without having to incur, extra loads of debt?
Yeah, and I mean, when you do this too, I mean, probably a lot of people don't sit down and talk to a financial planner,
No.
Unless it's, oh, I've got plenty of money to save and I can do this. I would recommend that, you actually have a two-pronged approach. When you're planning your family, or even if, you just, before, when you find out that, your family's expecting, whatever, I would first talk to, a credit counseling agency. If you've never made a budget, you're going to need a new budget. You're really going to have to understand your expenses and where they're going to go, which is a very good aspect of this report, because it gives you that idea of how much potentially those costs could be. So if you look at your budget and say, there's no way I'm going to be able to put $13,000 aside for a child, you've got to look at that budget to find ways to make that happen.
Yep.
If this is your intention, is to your family. After that, too, talk to a financial planner, because when you're talking about goals like you're talking about, college education, do they want to go to private school, whatever it may be, these are financial plans that you have to develop now. And it's much, when you're entering this situation, it's easier to start developing them with a financial planner on the onset.
It's easier to chip away in little amounts for a longer period of time than try to coming up with that lump sum at the end. Another big plan aspect that's often overlooked is healthcare. So making sure that family has some form of healthcare coverage, and that your children are enrolled or are signed up as soon as possible. Because health insurance, the longer you wait on that, the more expensive it gets.
And that was one of the increases I talked about too. Over the last decade, healthcare costs for families with children rose 58%. So those are large increases, and these are increases that you have to be able to absorb. All of this is a challenge in the economy that we live in, when over the past decade, median household income has fallen 7%, according to the Census Bureau. So you're making less money, your expenses are going up, and obviously when you have less of something but you need more of it, there's a problem.
Yep.
And these are all things you have to consider. So I would recommend you definitely do your research too. There's plenty of financial literacy blogs out there, a couple of specialty blogs too about parenting and how you can save money.
Mommy blogs are all over the place.
Indeed, so I would definitely start to look into those researches when you're planning a family, and reach out to places, nonprofit agencies, see exactly what you can do, talk to a financial planner, and really try to get a plan in motion.
There's even great resources like at bankrate.com. I know we've had a few guests from there. They have some really great financial calculators for estimating what child expenses are going to be over the next couple of years through year 18. You basically put in your own current level of financial information, your rent costs, your housing, mortgages, your savings rates, etc. And it'll tell you, what it would cost, and then how you can try to effectively get there, or where you need to fill in the gaps.
Yeah. So there's hate to tell you, parents or parents to be, but you have some homework to do.
Yeah, planning is the biggest thing. If you're consciously thinking about growing a family, or growing a family, I should say, not literally planting and growing a family, that saving, that first chunk that you need to have, that 5 to 7 that they advertise, or encourage people to have. You really want to focus down on that. The second expense you want to try to tackle is that education funding. You want to try anything you can chip away a little bit at a time, dollar cost average through it, that 18 years, that is going to be a tremendous debt that you can hope to either mitigate or avoid altogether when the time comes, should that child want to go to college.
Indeed, and actually one of the financial planners that contributed to this, some of the articles said that, new parents often ask about saving for college, but she urges them to actually look at the more immediate needs as well.
Yep.
Remember, it's estimated $13,000 a year.
Wow.
Wow. I'm assuming that the camera's still on, we just had.
Okay, so start that sentence over again. That's one for rulers.
Now we know that the black
Wow,
that's where we come. Well, we talked a lot about raising families and the costs associated with doing so this week, and we encourage you to visit some of these blogs that we mentioned. Also, do your research online and reach out to people. Listen, there's plenty of things you can do to save money as well. There's hand-me-down clothes. There's a lot of assistance out there for people that need it. Honestly, it's growing a family is a very important aspect to our culture, and might as well do so with a very comfortable, approach to it.
Couldn't have said it any better myself.
Well, listen, thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.